The gospel appointed for today is taken from St. John 1, beginning with the first verse.
Glory to you, O Lord.
In the beginning was the Word. The Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God, and all things came into being through him. Without him, not one thing came into being. What has come into being in him was life, and the life was the light of all the people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. There was a man sent from God, whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify to the light, so that all might believe through him. He himself was not the light, but he came to testify to the light. The true light, which enlightens everyone, was coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world came into being through him. Yet the world did not know him. He came to what was his own, and his own people did not accept him. But to all who received him, who believed in the name, his name, he gave power to become children of God, who were born not of blood, or the will of the flesh, or the will of man, but of God. And the Word became flesh and dwelt amongst us. We have seen his glory. The glory as of the Father's only Son, full of grace and of truth. John testified to him and cried out, quote, "This was he of whom I said, he who comes after me ranks ahead of me because he was before me. From his fullness we have all received grace upon grace. The law indeed was given through Moses. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God. It is God, the only Son, who is close to the Father's heart, who has made him known." Here ends our gospel for today. Praise to you, O Christ. You may be seated. Is it okay if I'm this far away?
Mm-hmm.
Is that okay? You think I'm good?
Yep.
When I read this rather magnificently worded gospel, it's strange sometimes what come into your head. You know what it is? Sometimes in your life something comes in and you hadn't thought of that person for years or that situation, and all of a sudden the lights come on. I remembered of all things being at Lutheran night at the Senators. The Senators are Harrisburg's baseball team. So we are there. I see friends from my own church in Steelton, which is where I was for 21 years. They had me. 21 years. God bless them. There I was sitting with some of my parishioners, my church organist, her husband, and having just the most wonderful time eating my hot dogs and grinding up my peanuts. And I'm talking to everybody, and then, for whatever reason, I'm looking at the people around us. They were not necessarily from Lutheran churches. There's other people that were at the ball game like us. And I, just putting that down, in both hands. I looked over, and friends, I saw a little girl. I'm thinking 5 or 6 years old, maybe. Looked like a child movie star. The most beautiful little face and hair. And she was beautifully dressed, not in a senator's t-shirt or something like this, like other little boys and girls might have on. No, she was dressed as if she was about to appear in the next movie. I was transfixed. I looked, I thought, that child is not real. She is so pretty. It is crazy. And then I looked a little closer. Fortunately, her mother and family were, I assume the father was the next one and whatever. And here's this little girl And then I thought to myself, oh my word, she's totally made up. It was expertly applied, but it looked like she had cake makeup on, little dimples, perfectly outlined lips. I think the blue eyes was even an application lens that you can get. I think her hair was even dyed. 5 or 6 years old. Her mother painted her up like a movie star. I think that's nuts. Where are our values? We're so worried about appearances that you have your little girl, 5 or 6 years old, made up like she's going to be in the next photo shoot. That's weird. Let's bring an example to the house here. Some of you, like me, can remember when you were a little boy or girl, and they were picking up teams. And you were either too big, too small, too tall, too short. And you were the kid that got picked last. Sometimes it was very superficial. You just hadn't lived in that neighborhood long enough. That's why you weren't picked. What kind of behavior is it? It's just stupid. It's mean-spirited, it's selfish, it's anything but nice, and it's of no value whatever. It's so, the word I use again, superficial. Nothing. We look at movie stars like they're super intelligent, don't we? I'm sorry to bust on them, but many of them are good actors, but they might not be that clever after all. But we get all shaky thinking about how wonderful they are. Is it really that important? You wonder if you're at all like me. With our stupid behavior, that the Lord ever thought it was worth His time after creating us to come down and help out. But that's what He did. In today's beautiful poetic entrance to John, we have a flavor given to that scene, to our salvation, like none of the other Gospels. None of them are written like John. His very spiritual nature. Not that they weren't spiritual as well, but that's the only way John sees it. And he makes a couple points. That's his whole Gospel. Listen to the beginning again. It says here, in the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God. He's in the beginning with God. All things came into being through Him, and without Him not one thing came into being. Isn't that out of this world talking? Doesn't it sound like a Shakespeare or a poem or a sonnet? What was, what has come from being in Him was life. Life was the light of all people. John is talking about God's incarnation. Big word, meaning what? He comes down from on high, if you will, a heavenly picture, down to our level, which is really amazing. You talk about a God that's got to love you. I know what the Lord's answer is to my question and yours. Why did He do it? My own quote, I would think from Jesus would be, I have not, and I will not give up on you. Jesus says that by every word and every action. No matter how superficial you are sometimes, no matter how greedy and selfish you are sometimes, and hateful sometimes, I still love you. And that's why I came into the world. As a human being, not as a ethereal spiritual God alone. No, no, no. Somebody you could talk to. Someone who would talk to you when God knows we didn't deserve love or forgiveness except from God. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. I almost want to say, hold your horses, John. Do you really want to do that? Is that really what you meant? God, you love me? He loves us that much? In the other Gospels, and I may mention this again to make sure we don't forget. In Matthew, Mark, and Luke, we have these beautiful stories of Jesus in a manger that touch our hearts, as well they should. They're just beautiful in their own kind of poetry and putting us in that scene. But John, he's too excited. He can't wait for that. There's nothing at all in John's Gospel about the manger, the wise men. All that picture of our Christmas scene is absent. All he wants to say is, God gave up his high and holy place for you and me. Became flesh and blood that would die for my sins and yours. He loved us that much. Listen to verse 14, which really says it all for John in his gospel. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we have seen his glory, the glory as of the Father's only Son. Notice also it's John 3:16 that you all know as well. Same gospel writer who says in his gospel, because sometimes we're very thick and we don't hear and we don't pay attention. For God so loved the world. Excuse me, I get a little emotional about this stuff. That he came and dwelt among us to teach us and die for us. When I was in seminary, we had a great old Professor Jacob Myers. Funny, I'm probably as old as he was when he taught me and others. Now, I'm an old guy too. And I remember one time we were in a little coffee shop at the Valentine Hall, where I've been at the seminary, and what I'm talking about. A little coffee shop down there. He's talking to some of us guys. Some of us are academically really good. Some of us are smart enough for getting along. And he says, fellas, what you need to know is that you're becoming pastors and ministers ordained to church, serve the Church of Jesus Christ. I don't want you to be a tourist. What? He said, tourists buy souvenirs and take pictures and move on. He said, that's not what you do in your church. Commit yourself to your people. Learn of their hardships and their joys, and stick with them. He said, I don't want you to be a tourist of the ministry of Jesus Christ. I want you to be a pilgrim who builds a tent and stays with the people as you and they become one. And I could say the same things to all of us as parishioners, believers in Jesus Christ our Lord. The same thing. In the Church of Jesus Christ, we don't need tourists. Oh, it'd be nice if they came in and see what we're up to, and hopefully that's good. But rather, that we would be a pilgrim who sets up shop, who, like Jesus Christ, comes down to listen, to hear, to share. I picked up a poem which to me has so much to say in a very simple way. The value of the change that John speaks of. From God to man. Oh, I love Matthew, Luke, Mark. But when it comes to saying one message, you can't beat John. Here's sort of a encapsulated version of what John's saying in this little poem. When Mary's baby walked this earth, people came from miles around to sit at his feet and hear the wisdom that could only come from God. They brought the sick, the lame, and those who were troubled in their minds. The winds and the seas had to obey him because he was Emmanuel, God with us. Formidable demons trembled and they ran away, screaming, when Mary's little baby walked the earth. From John, we have heard and read, God is Emmanuel. Jesus is the Word made flesh. God walking around in our skin, and it changed the world. To all who received him, who believed in his name, he gave the power to become the children of God. That's you. And that's me. No need to ask why. The answer is always, I love you, says God in Christ. That's why I came. Amen.